McGuire. Absent. Mr. Gasky.
Here.
Mr. Palmer.
Here.
Mr. Nordine here. Mr. Byer.
Here.
Mr. Weed.
Here. Next are agenda additions. Does anybody have any additions or changes? All right, hearing none. All in favor of the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The agenda is passed. Next is public comments. In order for the first public comment period, if you filled out a card and then submitted it to the superintendent, there'll be a 4-minute time limit. When you come to the podium, please introduce yourself. If for the second public comment, there's still a 4-minute time limit, but there's no need to fill out a card. Do we have any cards?
We do. First would be Deborah Dexel, who would like to talk about medical marijuana.
Hi, my name is Deborah Dexel, and I want to thank you for taking the time to hear me again. I know I've been up here several times, so I'll try not to bore you with some of the repetitive information. When I was here the last time, I brought out the fact that in just our surrounding areas, there are 3,613 people under the medical marijuana program. Currently, there are no local dispensaries for us to get decent medication or any medication outside of going to backyard growers. To give you a little background on just what I deal with, and I am one of 3,613 people with degenerative conditions. I have battled stage 3C ovarian cancer for 22 years. I have been under chemotherapy at 3 separate occasions. I have been under radiation once, well, 28 sessions, but I consider that one round. Every one of my joints are destroyed. I've already had 2 worked on with major surgery. There are a couple more that need to be done, but I don't know if I can physically handle it. This last time, we did major work on the shoulder. 3 weeks later, I was in for emergency surgery, and nobody knew if it was how that was going to come out because the opiates tied up my bowels to the point I had to have another section of intestine removed. To stay off of opiates, I use cannabis. I can get opiates all day long. I can get any kind of painkiller all day long because my body fits all the conditions for it. It's literally breaking down at every joint. I am in constant pain, and I am one of 3,613 people that do not have access locally to cannabis. It takes me 10.5 hours on a round trip to go down to Ypsilanti, where they have quality medicine in a safe environment. I would ask you to contact the people in Ypsilanti and talk to them about what they do, what regulations they put in to control how it is advertised, how it is marketed, how it is set up, because this dispensary sits right in the hub of downtown Ypsilanti, and you would never know it's a dispensary, because I told you the last time I passed it 3 times. Well, I passed it twice, and on the 3rd time just started opening doors. It was that well blended. I would ask you to do that because there are people here that do not have access to anything except backyard growers. We don't know what's in the product. We don't have a clue if it's mainly filters, if it is mainly THC with no CBD, and it's the CBD that I look for because it kills cancer cells. It helps the inflammation in the body. It does so much in helping people that can't eat to give them an appetite. I'd have starved to death this last time. I went down to 111 pounds, and my husband looked at me and said, okay, you got to start eating. Well, you have my kind of surgery, and I'm sorry, food just doesn't even look good. So we really had to struggle. And I don't want to go over, but I do want you to know that there are a lot of us here hurting, and we are in pain, and we are looking to you to help us so that we don't have to go without medication or deal with painkillers that do so much destruction on our bodies. We can't move forward. There's not a lot more I have to say other than the fact that I'm going to go right back to the Lord. He said that whatsoever you do to the least of my people, that you do unto me. And I am asking you not to be among the ones that would tell Jesus the least of his people didn't matter enough. We're hurting, we're in pain, and we are asking you to help us. Thank you.
Question.
Yes.
What is your definition of local? You talk about
I did. Okay, there's a 7-county region from Alpena, Alcona, Aranac, Iosco, Glenny, and Ogama. There's one more in there. I just gave 6, but there's Oscoda County, because they all touch Iosco. So that's local. It's a 7-county spread.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
You have any cards?
We do. Robert Taser would like to talk about budget items concerning the Planning Commission.
Robert Taser, Hillcrest Drive, Oscoda. Now that was a hard act to follow. Okay. So, I would like to comment about recent topics involving budget items that the township is currently investigating for the work sessions in the following days. I would like to bring it to the attention of this board a few items that I believe are important to fulfilling the responsibilities of the Oscoda Planning Commission as enacted and empowered by the Michigan Planning Enabling Act 33. First, under 125.3823, Section 23, members of a planning commission may be compensated for their services as provided by the legislative body. The planning commission may adopt bylaws relative to compensation and expenses of its members and employees. That's an important part right there. It says employees for travel when engaged in the performance of activities authorized by the legislative body, included but not limited to audiences at conferences, workshops, educational training programs, and another important part, meetings. After preparing an annual report under Section 19, a planning commission may prepare a detailed budget and submit the budget to the legislative body for approval or disapproval. The legislative body annually may appropriate funds to carry out the processes of the functions permitted under this act, and may match local government funds with federal, state, county, and other local government or private grants, contributions, or endowments. I believe we are lacking in the input into this section of the Enabling Act. As far as I know, the Planning Commission has never reviewed our budget, nor have been asked for our input into the budget. Now, I'm not suggesting that we set our budget. I'm simply suggesting that we are briefed and be able to voice our concerns involving budgetary concerns of the Commission. Secondly, I would like to mention that a few items that have been asked of the Planning Commission that as of yet we have been unable to put on our agenda because of lack of time to research. That, I believe, has to do with our funding or time available through the zoning office. In the past year, we have been asked to research form-based zoning, cell phone mini towers, alternative energy ordinances, along with reviewing our permits and many, many other things that we have been working on. We recently have been asked to remove language for permits for garage sales from our 165 ordinance books. Seems like something simple, but that's time-consuming and needs our zoning administrator's office to help us to do these things. We are also still involved in drafting a cohesive master plan for the township that seems to be continually stalled and delayed because of proofreading and fact-checking. We have been actively reviewing our 165 ordinances as directed by our bylaws and have several changes to them coming to this board for review in the next few weeks. The zoning administrator works in the Township Planning Commission to draft and propose amendments to the zoning ordinance as needed to ensure that the ordinance properly addresses current local land use issues and needs. One of the problems we currently face is in this lack of time of our zoning administrator to allocate the Planning Commission because of the responsibilities defined in job descriptions of our local administrator, our zoning administrator, as stated in the Oscoda Township website. I feel this is a hindrance to the Planning Commission in fulfilling our responsibilities as defined in our bylaws and in the Michigan Planning Enabling Act.
Thank you.
And I could go on.
Any other cards?
Yes, sir. Judith Smith would like to talk about a certificate of appreciation.
Hello. I'm here along with Don Stanslowski on behalf of the Oscoda Rotary to present you with a certificate of appreciation for your partnership in allowing us the use of the bathhouse at the Township Beach Park for our summer concert series. These events wouldn't be possible without your support. The Rotary Club and the Interact Club, which is made up of Oscoda High School students, organize these community events by securing the bands and providing refreshments. Weather permitting, these events are held every Thursday, 7 p.m., beginning the end of June through August. It is fun for all ages. I hope you've all had the opportunity to come down and see how well received it is by the community and by our summer visitors. It's really a lovely evening. We know your job isn't easy, and we do appreciate the hard work you do on behalf of our community. So again, thank you.
Thank you very much. That's wonderful. All right, another card?
Yes, Kathy Woosterbarth would like to talk about the GAC plant location and AKT Peerless.
We really appreciate everything the Rotary does here too.
Oh, that's right. Kathy Woosterbarth, 211 Evergreen Avenue. I am actually I'm here to ask about some things that are on the agenda, including the GAC, the glomerular activated carbon filtration system that will be hopefully implemented on the base here, and its location, which it looks like there's been various communications regarding that from the Air Force, from the Township, from the Airport Authority. So it looks like there's lots of communication. I'm on the RAB board also, so we're very interested in these communications and the decisions that are being made. We would like to be involved in terms of the options for the various locations in terms of re-injection or using the storm sewer systems for the effluent. So I just wanted to bring that up, that we are interested in being a part of that process. So I'm hoping that that will be in consideration when you make your decisions about locations and your recommendations. The other item I wanted to bring forward was the AKT Peerless consultation group that was hired by the township. I haven't heard the status of that group and whether they have made any recommendations or where they are with the township, and I would like to see that report either brought forward here at the township board or at the RAB meeting, so that we can see what the process is that they are utilizing in terms of giving us some consultation on namely, one of my interests is our community engagement group that is dealing with questions that the community has about the contamination of the water, and they want to know, where they can find information and how we're actually dealing with the, PR of this. So people are asking those questions, and I'd like to be able to give them some feedback on that. So if we could address the AKT Peerless, their recommendations on that, which we asked about when they first came to us, we'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Any others?
No, sir.
All right. Next we go on to a presentation by Irisa.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody tonight. Basically, I'm here tonight to talk to you real briefly about our career and technical education millage. You'll see it abbreviated as CTE. That's what CTE stands for, is career and technical education. We're looking for 0.65 mils for a 10-year period of time to fund the current programs we have, which is the automotive program, the power mechanics program, the health sciences program, and the culinary arts program, along with the program we do with Coletta Air for basically interns up there. We have several high school kids that are right on Coletta's facility that take classes up there as well. We're also looking at adding a building trades program. Anybody that is basically trying to do anything in construction right now understands that there's quite the shortage in people in the skilled trades area, and this will give kids an opportunity to get their hands dirty, okay, and experience in working in the building trades area. They'll be able to basically work on a house from beginning to completion over the course of 2 years. It'll give the kids a great opportunity to see if they really truly have an interest in being a carpenter, an electrician, a plumber, a mason, all the different trades that are associated with building a home and so forth. To me, this is extremely important also because of the fact that a lot of our kids anymore don't get those opportunities. I had the opportunity to do a lot of those things working with my dad. Okay, we did a lot of those things as a family, and that doesn't happen so much anymore because, quite honestly, I don't think as many dads are spending the time to do it with their kids. So this is an awesome opportunity. I look at the worst case scenario out of the kids that go through that program is they learn to take care of their own house. Okay, best case scenario is that they discover that's a trade that they want to go into and they pursue it further. Hopefully this will help alleviate some of the shortages we have in our area in this area, okay? And it will help alleviate the shortage, honestly, around the state if they want to go someplace else also, because we're not alone in the shortage in those areas. The other program we're looking at starting is the Teacher Prep Academy. The Teacher Prep Academy is basically for us to hopefully be able to essentially grow some of our own people in the teaching profession. Right now, if you're posting something at the secondary level, it's very, very difficult to find people. If you talk to Scott Moore, the superintendent here, or any of the superintendents in the other school districts, you'll find folks in the secondary areas, they're having a great deal of trouble finding it. You know, I basically call it, they're in the honestly, where we used to post a position and get a couple hundred people apply, we're down to 20 or less people applying for those same positions. And the situation is going to do nothing but get worse. And I say that because if you take a look at 2010 compared to today, there's less than half as many people enrolled in the schools of education. So it's a scenario that is going to get increasingly worse over the course of the next couple of years. Who do we serve? We serve the kids in the 4 local districts, being Oscoda, Hale, Whittemore, Prescott, and Tawas. We help all 4 of those schools with providing career and technical education. How did we get into that business? Quite honestly, the same way we got into the special education business back in about 1962. Smaller districts have a rough time creating a critical mass of students for special ed, a particular program. When we combine them all together, that gives us enough students to be able to offer those programs. Same thing with career and technical education. The programs that we offer would not stand alone in any one of the districts, but when we combine it, we're able to have the AM and PM sections like we have at this point in time. So that's how we got into this business, to basically do it in the most economical format. What does it cost? If you own a $100,000 home, it's $32.50 for a year, okay, or a little less than 9 cents a day. You know, I could quite honestly go on and on. I won't go through that, but does the board have any questions?
Well, as a retired teacher, I would just add that, and I think most of you, when you went to high school, probably were used to wood shop, metal shop. Those don't exist anymore, only in the IRASA program. And so if you think those things are valuable to kids, that's the place.
Thank you, Jim.
You did not introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name's Dana McCrew. I'm the superintendent of Oscoda.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
And your phone number, if people have questions, 362...
3006,
yeah.
Extension 130.
Okay.
And so is the millage to
continue programs
Yes,
and to add new programs?
to add the 2 new programs and continue the 4 that we have in-house.
And so what happens if the millage does not pass?
Basically, right now, we charge $28.25 tuition costs to the kids that come to our program. That would be discontinued if the millage passes. If it doesn't pass, that continues on, and we'll try to continue the programs that we had. But the last time we asked for this kind of millage, we also had a multimedia program. Our health sciences was actually split into 2 parts, it's combined into 1. So we'll continue to survive as best we can, but quite honestly, it'll probably continue to contract because of the lack of funding. Okay?
Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Thank you, folks.
All right, on to the consent agenda. We have the work session meeting minutes from September 20th, minutes from September 22nd, minutes from September 25th, and the closed session meeting minutes from September 25th. Any questions on those? I do know for people who read the package earlier in the week that September 25th minutes do have a change in it. It changed the first line, changed the name to Miss McGuire from Mr. Weed. And then there's finance, payment of bills, $249,320.86. And the superintendent's report for the budget work session reminder, which is October 11th. Any questions, comments?
I have a couple things. In the second page of the regular board meeting, meetings of September 25, on the second page, kind of toward the bottom, third item from the bottom. General discussion about satisfactory level of services received over the life of the current contract, talking about auditing, the contract expired. And then it says, Mr. Byer recalled receiving multiple bids for auditing services with some of the companies being located a relatively great distance away. I did say that. I may have even mentioned Sault Ste. Marie being one example, but my point was not that. The point was that, I've been on this board for 15 years, and the only other person is the lady that sits right here. So if she were here, she would probably agree with me. We have memories of when we used to get a lot of bids for things like auditing. And my point 2 weeks ago was not that we get people from Sault Ste. Marie that apply here, is that we used to get 4 or 5, maybe half a dozen bids, but regardless of that number, we still went for the high bid, either the high bid or the second high bid. That was what I was trying to get across, and I contend that is the reason why it's really tough to get 4 or 5 companies to bid anymore, is because they may have figured that Oscoda is going to go for the firm in Tawas no matter what. So why should we go through all the work to prepare bids? That's what I was trying to get across. Not just that somebody from 100 miles away applies. So,
I remember that.
so,
Thank you, Jim.
and I guess the other thing I would be, we went last time to paid bills, I think in the area of $77,000 2 weeks ago. And now we have $250,000 tonight, I believe. I'm not contesting that, but can somebody give me some indication of why we went from 77,000 to 250? There's some giant item that I haven't had time to go through it
I believe there is a Huron Shores bill in the list. I don't have the list in front of me, but I think that could have significant impact.
Okay. Because usually when it jumps up like that, you guys, or either Jamie or yourself, are real quick to say, hey, we realize it has really jumped.
Right.
This is why. So,
Are you requesting a change to the minutes?
yes, I know you've redone the minutes already.
No problem. Happily, absolutely.
I'm kind of passionate about that.
Sure.
So, please.
I appreciate it. It makes my job easier with clarification like that, so I really do
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Any other comments? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda with the change for the September 25th minutes?
I would move that we accept the minutes with the change.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes. Motion's passed. Next, subcommittee reports and project updates. I have two of them here. One is, I attended the Alpena County Intergovernmental Council meeting last week, which is the same kind of meeting that we have here in Oscoda County, where all the townships and municipalities come together and try to provide some continuity between everybody. At that meeting, I gave a very short briefing about PFAS contamination, and they have invited me back for their February meeting to give much more expounded details about it. They want to know the issues that we've come across and some of the things. This is a new thing for them, some of the issues we've dealt with, so they kind of get an idea of what's coming their way. One of my goals with that is also to hopefully garner more municipalities to come together, work together to get the state to give us a little more attention for this matter. The other one regarding AKT Peerless update, we've gone through some information gathering, or they have actually gone through some information gathering. They met with us, kind of determined what our goals were, what details we had about the community and the contamination. We had a couple of meetings on that, but some meetings have been canceled in between because there have been some people who have been sick or other things that have come up, so there have been some delays with that. But we do have another meeting coming up pretty soon. I don't remember the date of it, though. Hopefully we'll get something a little firmer at that meeting. Does anybody have any other subcommittees or projects?
Just a suggestion on the road committee. I mentioned last meeting that we got a kind of a freebie when they seal-coated Blaine Street. Do you think just a brief note of thank you to the road commission would be in order a little bit?
Sure.
That was a kind of a plus, so.
That did not get charged to us?
No. I don't believe so.
Well,
Or am I
the
wrong?
question would be, are those materials that would have been left over from the other job? And that would be an inquiry we would want to make. I mean, we would be appreciative, but more appreciative if they weren't materials we had paid for.
Pretend you don't know and thank them. Thank them very enthusiastically, and maybe we won't get a bill.
I have received positive comments about
Bruce never gave
Blaine.
anything away.
Always the first.
any others?
I would just mention a couple of things. Our engineering selection committee, we've interviewed 4 firms, and we're going to meet again Wednesday, I believe it is, to go over those. I made some calls, references on firms, and we'll be bringing aboard a recommendation, I hope, soon. And one other comment I would make has to do with the Planning Commission, and it's on the agenda tonight for the Wordsmith District. We've been working on the rezoning in Wordsmith to remove the W. We've been looking at the various zoning requirements for the residential districts, and they're virtually identical. And now we're beginning to look at the business and industrial, and it actually turns out that the Wordsmith industrial is more restrictive than our regular industrial zones here in Oscoda. So just some other things we're working on with the Planning Commission, but it is on the agenda for tonight for the Wordsmith district.
Bob, regarding your comment about Blaine Street might have been leftover materials, just occurred to me. That day I was kind of nosing around, and they did Blaine Street first. That doesn't sound like leftover stuff to me. They did that in the early morning, and then I happened to be out here, and I noticed all their equipment heading for Alexander at a later time, the same day. So unless they're real super planners, I don't see that as being leftover.
Well, I don't believe that to be the case either, but,
Yeah.
but I'm just suggesting we should probably be certain in terms of how we
Okay.
characterize our response. Based on my discussion with Mr. Ballin, I believe that it was an attempt to try and make things right, if you will,
Mhm.
because the project didn't turn out like we had hoped.
Okay.
The Blaine Street project.
Yeah.
All right, on to the superintendent's report, the assessing service contract proposal.
Yes, we talked about both assessing and auditing contract proposals or service contracts at our last meeting. And direction was to seek a proposal from Northern Assessing and Consultants in furtherance of trying to come to terms with the company as opposed to undergoing a competitive bidding process. And that approach would be taken consistent with the purchasing policy, whereby we would seek a 2-year agreement with the potential to extend for an additional 2 years. So that is the way the proposal from Northern Assessing and Consultants is structured. It was sent to the board by separate communication to preserve the integrity of the bidding process, if in fact that's determined to be the most appropriate course of action. However, as I note in my report here, it would be on my observation that the proposal is reasonable on an internal and external cost comparison basis. And therefore, if the board were in concurrence with that observation, we would divulge the figures and the percentage increase and move forward towards development of contract agreements, presumably using our standard form, something similar to the contract which will be terminating at the end of the year.
Any comments?
I would just note that the figures that they provided for years 2018 through 2021, the increases amount to a 2% increase year over year, which is about what our increases for employees would be.
Not the 2.5 that they indicate?
Works out to be 2%.
Okay.
I figured 2% too.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I would move to accept the renewal proposal from Northern Assessing Consultants, subject to development and execution of a contract agreement.
I'll support that. Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Weed. Roll call.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, auditing service contract proposal.
Essentially the same question for auditing services. I've by separate communication forwarded a proposal from Stevenson and Company for renewal of the professional services agreement, again on a 2-year initial basis with the ability to extend for an additional 2 years. This proposal too seems to be reasonable. Of course, that's a subjective evaluation, but from my perspective, I guess I would offer the same observation. So we essentially have the same decision to make. Do we wish to consider bidding, or do we wish to move forward in seeking a contract with Stevenson and Company based on the proposal that they've submitted?
Comments?
Well, similar comment to my other, this works out to be a 1% increase year over year for these 4 years that they've provided. So it's pretty modest increase year over year for the next 4 years.
Exactly.
Anything else?
Do we have any obligation or need or any other precedents, I guess, whatever options are? Do we have to put this out for bid? Or do we have to put or solicit other companies?
We do not. We have the latitude, particularly with professional services. The board's got a fair amount of latitude under the purchasing policy provisions in general, but particularly when it comes to professional services.
Thank you.
Anything else? Is there a motion? I make a motion, we go forward with Stevenson and Company for new contract for auditing services.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, utility billing clerk vacancy.
Yes, we have a vacancy. Well, actually, we've been notified we will have a vacancy at month end now, given the revised resignation of our current employee. So we have undertaken a recruitment process, and I am prepared this evening to offer a recommendation for hiring an employee. However, the other option we had talked about was solicitation of a proposal from our contract operator to have the position subcontracted under the existing water and sewer agreement. There is a proposal that has been provided, and again, it has not been included in the packet. The board's got a copy of that in the event we wanted to consider bidding on a privatized basis for that position. I'm not suggesting we do that, but thought it prudent to preserve the option. During our pre-board meeting on Friday, there was discussion about the potential that the company might be flexible in pricing in one of two ways, either reduce the fee that's being proposed for the 29-hour scope of services, or consider expanding to 40 hours in sole service of Oscoda Township. Right now, it's 29 hours for Oscoda Township, with the balance of the full-time position being directed to other needs within the region, presumably. In speaking with representatives of the company after corresponding by email, it would appear that they are comfortable with the fact that it's a reasonable proposal as written. So what we have on the table is what we are going to need to consider in terms of making a decision. My observation on Friday is that there is a significant pricing differential between those two options. Not 100% difference, but substantial. So if the board were comfortable with that differential, and for purposes of perspective, you're all aware of the numbers relative to the F&V proposal. Our cost is approximately $23,000 for the position as it's currently structured. You could probably add administrative overhead to that, but nonetheless, there's a significant gap there if you do the math. So the first question is, do we want to consider contracting, or do we want to consider moving ahead and filling the position as it's been historically structured? If it is the latter situation, then I have an employment application I can distribute. If not, we would need to move forward and consider amending the agreement with FVOP to include provision of that scope of service.
Discussion?
Yeah, being a kind of lazy guy, would you just tell me what F&V's quote was? Don't make me dig for it.
The first year, it's approximately $42,000.
Twice.
Yeah.
Pardon me.
Okay, thank you.
Quite honestly, I don't think it would make sense for us to seek bids for contracting that position. The idea was to have F&V, who does our water and sewer operations now, undertake that position. To have F&V doing our operations and then try and get a contract with somebody else in the billing department, I think would be, wouldn't serve much of a purpose. The only reason that I suggested we look at that option is that it's a time when we were losing our utility billing clerk. As far as I know, she was doing a fine job. I wouldn't have suggested we let her go to try and get a contract with that. But since we were at that point, it made sense to at least look into that option. Given the differential in cost, it is talking about a full-time employee as opposed to a part-time employee, but it nearly double the cost. I quite honestly can't see a benefit there. Let me take that back. There are some benefits, certainly, with F&V, who does the work and things that have to be done through the water and sewer department, but for the billing, I just don't see the advantage for that much extra.
To be fair to the discussion on both sides, it is, and after having our dialogue earlier today, it's possible that their recruitment profile might be a little different than ours in terms of a full-time employee who can service the entire region. And there would be some benefit in terms of a full-time position offering more continuity for Oscoda Township. But there is a significant gap there even with those factors considered.
I think if their price would have been a little more reasonable, even if it was more than what we were budgeting for a utility clerk, it might have made it more advantageous, but at almost double the price, I really can't justify that.
Right, especially if they're gonna carry out duties, other duties.
Other duties on
It's almost like we're paying for them to do work for other municipalities.
Right.
Giving them a free office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? Is there a motion? Actually, I don't know if we need a motion for this. We just need consensus as to what direction we're gonna go in.
Yes, if the consensus is that we should hire an employee, we should probably acknowledge that and then talk about whether we want to take up that discussion this evening also.
Okay. So, what's the desire of the board?
Consider an employee.
I'd be good with an
Yeah.
employee.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, give me two.
Thank you.
and I apologize for the last minute nature of this, but given the way this discussion unfolded, I thought it appropriate to
Be prepared.
deal with it in this way. So we have under,
Do you want to, does the board want to take a 5-minute recess to review this information?
Actually, I would. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's several pages to read here, and I don't
All
think
right,
it's,
I'll make a motion, we go into a, let's make a 6-minute recess.
No support.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. All right, we're in recess.
Gasky.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Nardine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes. All right, we're back in session. All right. Any comments?
When is this person available to start now?
Very soon. Within a week, certainly, if not sooner, is my understanding.
I noticed the short duration at the U.S. Postal Service. I was wondering if there was anything that you gathered during the interview as to why it was so short.
We did not, and I'm not sure that I would want to get into that in public. I would note that the applicant is here this evening at her own behest. She's very enthused about the position and took upon herself to come to the meeting. So
That's fair.
How many applicants do we have?
I'm going to say we probably had 20 plus. We did 5 interviews.
We still gonna work some kind of a overlap with Hannah?
Yes, Hannah would be available through the end of October.
And so this, Ms. Brown would be able to start prior to that time so that she'd have time to work with Hannah?
That is my understanding, yes.
Okay.
Correct me if my observations are wrong. It looks like Ms. Brown has significantly more experience qualifications over Hannah that we had as just prior when she was leaving. It looks like she has a lot more in the experience of telephone communications and with negotiation, dispute mediation, and a lot more hands-on experience possibly that we could use as the billing clerk. Some of it just good but supportive experience.
Yes, yes.
All right, and since Hannah left rather quickly, what was it, within about a year or so, thereabouts, has Ms. Brown expressed any indication as to her interest in staying with us long-term?
She is interested in a part-time position, which usually bodes well for tenure.
Good.
Any other comments?
I might add that her husband is one of our key firemen, one of the officers, and her son used to be a patrolman, police patrolman for Oscoda Township.
Very
Moved
nice.
on to the state police. So
That's good.
the family is fairly well invested in Oscoda Township, so.
And I should indicate, I don't know who this person is.
Maybe that's a good thing, too.
Unbiased questions.
All right, is there a motion?
I'll make the motion that we hire Robin Brown for position of utility billings clerk.
Could I intervene here? I would suggest we make this a conditional offer subject to pre-employment screening and testing.
Yep.
Is that acceptable?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Include that.
Got it.
I'll support that.
Mr. Gieske, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call?
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Gasky.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, to the letter of understanding for the union holiday pay.
Yes. An issue's recently emerged where a part-time employee was not scheduled to work on a paid holiday. This would be Labor Day due to schedule modifications, and we were approached subsequently about whether payment should be made as a holiday for that particular Labor Day, even though the employee wasn't scheduled. It was indicated that that would presumably be a matter of fairness. And I've attached a copy of the labor contract, which doesn't provide, as you might know, clear guidance on that particular question. Again, the underlying premise, I think, from the bargaining unit's perspective is that the holiday should be paid whether the employee is scheduled to work or not. from township standpoint, there would be concern that we establish a precedent where if you took that premise at face value with no conditions, you would then be potentially in a position where you are paying people for more hours than they're regularly scheduled to work in any given work week. Presumably then, in some circumstances, bumping up against the 29-hour limit we've established for part-time employees creates that potential. So the letter of understanding is intended to be a compromise that would address this situation and similar occurrences moving forward if they were to occur from a scheduling standpoint. Essentially what we're saying is we would acknowledge that paid holiday by scheduling something as soon as practical after, where the employee would be given a paid day off. It would be ideally during the pay period, but within a couple of weeks at the longest. The bargaining unit has agreed to the letter. At this point, they find it acceptable in addressing the concern. So I'm seeking approval from the supervisor and clerk to execute the letter of understanding, subject to confirming endorsement of the bargaining unit.
Comments? Is there a motion?
I guess first I have a comment. You know, we've gone through a number of conversations with different individuals or groups who have individually or in their collectiveness, that they have their own perspective or interpretation of what it is we put in a contract as part of the agreement. And I guess the thing that concerns me is, as a criticism of our labor agreements, why it is that we find ourselves in a situation that we are having to negotiate what we've already negotiated. It's a waste of our time, and I think it puts us in an awkward position as a township, and it's a waste of your time, but it's also a waste of the individuals' times who are involved, because they don't feel that it was clear to them. I just wanted to make the comment. I don't know other than whether or not we're doing due diligence on reviewing our labor agreements before they're signed, but I think it's just a pattern that I find concerning. So that's my comment.
I agree.
Well, I would just say that in my experience, having employees in the past, generally speaking, a full-time employee is more than happy to have a day off with pay. Typically, part-time employees are generally always looking for more hours. So giving paid holidays, in effect, gives them that little extra pay several times during the year. Now, having said that, we're also dealing with a union, which we have a contract with. So if this letter of understanding is acceptable to the employee and the union, then on my part, it's acceptable. Should be acceptable to the board, because we're working where we'll give a person another day off with pay. My experience typically is that's not what employees want that only work part-time. They're really not looking for another day off. But we're dealing with a union, and if the union is agreeable to this term, and this is what they are proposing, then I don't see why we wouldn't honor that. Just my thoughts.
I'd like to say, going back to Mr. Cummings' point about the ambiguity or potential for confusion regarding to the contracts, they're both have been entered into and signed by each party. If there was any level of misunderstanding, you shouldn't sign your name to it, you know.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that, and I deal with contracts all the time. It's just, I guess, whether the clarity in words is what's there, because that's where ambiguity comes in.
Sure. And
we think that it means this, but then find out later that it means, you know, we get that moment of, oh, but it could mean something different.
True. true. And I'm all on board for clarity. I mean, I don't want to go against that. I'm purport that I'm against clarity. I don't at all. So I'm going to strive for that in all cases.
Yeah.
But
It just seems that, like I said, we've wasted a lot of time on this type of trouble in recent times since I've been on the board. And I just feel like it's, I'm not sure the source of it, but it's something that I think might be worth trying to find some root cause analysis and get that hole plugged, because it's not purposeful for anybody, you know, whether it be Mr. Stalker or a union or an individual who's represented by a union.
Well, to elaborate a little bit here, the intent with these types of letters is to work towards some kind of resolution. And if there is a propensity from an individual or individuals to raise issues, I guess I would suggest that clarity in language would be helpful. And we had this discussion Friday morning in some depth. But if there is a mindset to look for those things and try and raise questions, and certainly people have that right, the clarifications would help, but I'm doubtful they would totally eliminate the issues.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
Yeah, I move that we approve the supervisor and clerk to execute this letter of understanding.
And I support that.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gajewski,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next on to Township Hall hip roof replacement.
Thank you. At the August 28th meeting, I provided information to the board in regard to an RFP that was solicited on August 4th for the replacement of the hip-type roof system that's located over the section of the Township Hall, currently occupied by the assessor or treasurer, and basically serves as the main entrance into the building. Unfortunately, no bids were received by the August 25th deadline, and I reported to the board that one vendor, based on their workload, had indicated that if the board would extend the November 1st deadline for completion till the spring of 2018, they would be able to submit a proposal. Based on the lack of response and the comment that I just referenced from the one contractor, staff felt that rebidding the project again this fall would more likely lead to that same outcome of no bids. It was decided to rebid the project towards the end of 2017 with a spring 2018 construction timeframe, and add an alternate of a metal roof system to the existing 50-year shingle identified in the original bid specs. Subsequently, during the October 2nd staff meeting that occurred last week, discussion took place in regard to the Building and Grounds Department being extremely concerned about going through a winter with this hip style roof in its current condition. The patchwork that had been performed last fall, basically in 2016, was not intended to serve long term, and if we were to experience a heavy snow load or freezing, the similar amount of freezing rains as occurred in 2016-17 winter, there was concern as to whether or not that existing roof would in fact fail. Based on this discussion, staff did procure a price quote from a contractor that indicated they could perform the work yet this fall. The price quote was provided by a separate communication for the board's consideration to avoid compromising the bid process if that were to occur at some point in the near future. The contractor has indicated that the work could be completed within a 3-week time frame once the award had been made. The quote that I've provided this evening is for both the 50-year shingle and an option of a standing seam metal roof, and I would note does not include a performance bond. The Building and Grounds Department foreman has reviewed the price quote, and his recommendation is to move forward with the shingle type roof. So this evening I'm seeking direction from the board in regard to the proposal.
Comments?
If we knew this was bad in 2016, why did we wait until August of 2017 to put it out for bid? And then wanted it done before the winter of 2017.
We started the process of doing the RFP, like drafting the document, which was done by my office, and getting those bid specifications from the buildings and ground crew, and it took longer than, I guess.
8 months?
I guess if you want to break it down to 8 months, 8 months, Martin. It took longer than it should have.
Any other comments?
What did the DPW say about metal roof? Not necessary, or what?
It's Bill's opinion. He's not a big fan of metal roofs, so
Okay.
just his opinion. And then based on the cost difference, didn't feel that it was, because we spec'd a 50-year shingle, felt that we asked for a better shingle for the project, so he felt that that was adequate.
Do you know if this contractor has experience with metal roofs?
Yes, he does.
He does.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of number of years do they give you for a metal roof? What do they quote?
I believe that material was in the specifications in that.
The metal roof had a 25-year warranty, and the shingles had a 50-year warranty.
And then I would note that the contractor did extend a 10-year warranty on his labor. We generally ask for, in our RFPs, we generally ask for 2 years for labor.
Well, looking at the prices he submitted, I don't think the prices are unreasonable. And I think it might be a mistake to wait and try and weather this roof through the winter. You know, if we were to have a tough winter, we may end up with way more damage in the township hall than what we have now with the roof. So even though I wish we could have got some bids on this, if we have a local contractor that's willing to do the work, based on the prices he's quoted, it seems to be reasonable to me, the price he has. I think I would be in favor of going ahead and getting this done before winter.
I'm in favor of the shingles because of the reduced cost.
Yeah,
I think
I think the shingles would be.
I think at this point of our budget, we need to do that. So is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the bid from Can Do Contracting to do a shingled roof on the township hall.
Support that.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Gajewski. Roll call.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, for Tall Field Access Agreement.
All right, at the October 24th, 2016 meeting, staff made the board aware of a request from a consultant in regard to work being performed on behalf of the Premcor Refining Group. This request was in regard to environmental release that was filed with the MDEQ in 1997 for the former Clark Station, which is currently in Admiral Station, and involved the installation of monitoring wells on the township property. This request from Premcor Refining Group was also discussed again at the December 12th, 2016 meeting, specifically the access agreement and whether or not it met the indemnification requirement as set forth by the board. This topic is again on the agenda this evening, a little less than a year later, to provide an update to the board that the township's attorney believes he now has an agreement that provides the necessary indemnification protection for the township, as well as acceptance by the Premcor Group to execute. I would actually add that we received a signed copy from Premcor today via FedEx delivery, I believe. Mr. Eppert dropped off. So it has been executed by Premcor. This revised agreement varies slightly from the agreement that was previously distributed to the board last year and is being provided this evening for the board's information and review. Based on the prior action in approving the agreement originally, it's the intent of staff to move forward with the execution of this agreement prepared by the township's attorney if the board is amenable.
Comments?
For the information of people in the room or people watching this or people reading the paper, this is because of a spillage at the gas station
Across from Fertile Field, yes.
some years ago.
Yep, and involves an installation of monitoring wells. They've already gotten permission from MDOT to put them in the road right away. This is to provide permission to install them on the township's property, as well as use the township's property to access the road in order to put them in the road right away. So,
And what will this look like visually? Are these things going to stick up much like the test wells that are out F41
I believe that these are all flush mounted,
flush?
Mhm.
Okay.
but I could confirm that.
Okay.
Do they have a time frame how long these will be in place?
No. But they're supposed to, there's language in the document that mandates that they remove them when completed.
So they will remove them?
Yes, according to what was agreed upon.
And the location of them on the field, it's, my understanding is close to the sidewalk, it's not too
Right.
far into the field.
Correct.
Currently, if
Mhm.
they decide they want to go further or chase anything, is that allowable, is that?
It doesn't actually, nothing that I am aware of in the agreement specifies where the locations. There was a work plan that was originally submitted. So I
Okay.
would think that we could go over that with them again, because the original work plan did not impact any sidewalks or landscaping that was done, or the sign, the Fertile Field sign that's located in that same area.
Sure.
Anything else? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we go ahead with the approval for the test wells on Fertile Field.
Also-
Agree. Second.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call?
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, on to medical marijuana ordinance.
This particular topic was tabled at the last meeting with the intent that we get the entire board here to talk about it. The Planning Commission has made some modest changes to the document, and we are now in a position where we can consider moving forward with adoption. I had put a memo in the packet outlining some basic questions that would guide us in decision-making. Is the content of the document acceptable in current form? Assuming, if it is, assuming we still wish to proceed with adoption, do we wish to entertain the possibility of a public hearing? There is a resolution on the board table which would initiate the process, which would call for the first reading and establishment of a public hearing at a subsequent meeting. If we were going to move forward, then we would do a second reading, adopt the ordinance by resolution, and have also the appropriate publications along that process. So we are approaching the decision-making point for this piece of legislation now.
One thing I would like to do is for us to go ahead and establish the steps to take from this point, so that I guess we're all clear if you guys agree to these steps. My idea was that we do this resolution, then at the next meeting have a reading and the board comments. Then at the meeting after that, do a public hearing, which the official public hearing was done at the Planning Commission when?
I don't remember the date of that. Do you remember? We had two.
But
Do you remember the dates?
You've had one that was maybe a month ago, is that right?
We had one in September.
Okay, so, but we will also have a public hearing, because we've pretty much let the public know that we would do that. And then the meeting after that have a vote, assuming all 7 board members are present.
And there would be a second reading then too?
That's correct, that would be
Okay.
the second reading. Does that make sense?
That
Do
makes
you
sense.
want something different?
I'm fine with that. Question though, you mentioned having the first reading and board comments. That would leave the potential for, if it's a substantial comment, we wouldn't be able to do the reading that night. Is-
Sure, if it required a change to the ordinance.
For me, there aren't going to be any substantial comments as I sit here tonight, so I'm okay with that, but
Okay.
just wanted to point out the potential.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of it have to be a little bit flexible, but.
Yeah, okay, I'm good with that. And you mentioned a resolution, the resolution in the back.
This resolution here would go ahead and establish that we would have a reading and a public consideration. We would go ahead and set a date for a public hearing, but it doesn't go beyond that. It's not for passing the resolution. Has no bearing on the, I'm sorry, not resolution. It has no bearing on the ordinance itself.
But I would just point out that the document that we have, the actual ordinance, was prepared by the attorney. The planning commission drafted a copy, and we sent it to the attorney, and he actually drafted his own ordinance. Now, it was very similar to what we sent to him. We got good grades from the attorney on what we had written. But I just wanted to point out that the document that is in the packet was actually written by our attorney. So we feel that everything is pretty solid in terms of an ordinance to meet the state requirements.
I have a question. At the last meeting, you mentioned you had contacted the attorney about the carbon filters for odor control, and you expected to have an answer back by this meeting.
Yeah,
Wondering about
he felt that would be handled by the state. That's in the statute, that those are required, and that it would be maintained by the state requirements for that. He didn't believe we needed anything additional. There's a problem. We, as a township, in our ordinance, we can't, by law, overstep any bounds that are prescribed under statute by the state. But we can follow what is allowed by the state. And so, to your question, when I talked to him, he said, well, that's a requirement under the statute of the state, and they would have to follow up on that. He said it's implied that if they require carbon filtration for the odors, that has to be maintained. So.
Sure. The only reason I bring it up is in the vein of avoiding ambiguity, I see a potential stumbling block there, so trying to make it as easy on us in the future as possible. But
Right. And I would point out one thing. Ms. Dexel was mentioning the quality of marijuana, and there are ongoing additions to the regulation. One that just came up last week is the state is now requiring that all marijuana by licensees has to be tested by a compliance testing firm. That's one of the licenses that's available, is compliance testing. All products have to be tested at the grower level, and then after the processing level. So the products are tested twice by a lab before they go to a provisioning center for sale. And that's something that was just new about a week ago. I get updates from Lara on things going on with the Medical Marijuana Board, and that was one of the things that just recently came out. So it's an ongoing process. It addresses what she was talking about, but those requirements are not applied to local growers. So in other words, if somebody has a license to grow their own marijuana, which is legal now, or a caregiver who can provide marijuana to up to 6 patients, 12 plants each, there's no testing of that product. You get whatever you get, and depending on what fertilizers or pest control or whatever you spray on the plants or anything, that could be in the product. Under the state law, the licenses, the growers and the processors, that product has to be tested by a compliance lab before sale. So it, to her point, it gives some confidence to people that are purchasing the product that they're getting a quality product.
Any other comments?
Well, these changes, Bill, do we have to keep amending our ordinance or no?
No.
No.
These are state requirements.
State requirements.
That will
not-
be imposed
they'll
on
do
the
without-
licensees, yeah.
Okay.
All right, so do we have a motion for resolution 2017-20?
Yeah, I make a motion that we go ahead with, what is the number, 200,
2017-20.
yes.
I'll support that. Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Mr. Weed. Roll call.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Okay, so for the next meeting then, we can do the first reading and have board input. At that meeting, we can then schedule the public hearing, which should be the meeting after that. We'll see how the schedule works out with board members. But of course, if at the public hearing, not all board members are here, we can't really do much about that. We just need to have a public hearing. And then from there, we can determine the meeting after that to have a vote, or at the soonest meeting we have that has all 7 members present.
Yes.
Okay. Is that what you needed for that?
Yes, well, for clarification's sake, we certainly don't need to. We actually could do the reading this evening and establish a public hearing date now that the resolution's been adopted, if the board wanted to entertain that possibility.
How about the next meeting, we do the board input, then have the reading right after that, depending on what that board input is?
That's fine.
Does that work to your point of if there may be a substantial change?
Yes.
All right, then, next is superintendent evaluation contract extension. I have placed before you the summary of showing the averages, scores of the evaluations I received. Out of the 7 evaluators, I received 5 evaluations back. I can send everybody copies of the evaluations if you wish to see them. But other than that, this closes out the evaluations. Have you found it? Does anybody have any comments? Okay. You need a motion on the contract extension?
It is required under the contract, yes, assuming the positive.
All right.
Yes.
So do we have a motion regarding contract extension as outlined under the superintendent's contract?
And I should clarify here, an extension is not required, but action of the board presumably would be one way or the other. Just for, yeah.
I'll make the motion. I move that we extend Mr. Stalker's contract.
I'll support that.
1 more year, I guess it is. It's annually, right? Yeah.
All right, motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, website development and enhancement.
This item was placed on the agenda at the behest of Trustee Cummings. I think the underlying intent was to create the opportunity to talk about some of the goals and objectives that we would be trying to pursue in enhancing the website moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. And my apologies to the board, I wasn't able to make the Friday morning work session to discuss some of these points. So that said, there was an email that I had forwarded to Mr. Stalker last week describing some samples of work done by a company that I had met at the MTA training session early this year. I think a number of us were there, and probably a number of us stopped by a similar booth. And the gentleman's name was Andrew Adams. And the fact was that there were some examples of websites of varying complexity. Some of them were quite simple. The one that I found the most compelling was actually not an actual working website yet, but rather an attachment with some screenshots that were still developing. That I thought was much more applicable to what we have and what we have going on within Oscoda. We have a lot more than just a simple municipality that doesn't have a community center and doesn't have a police department and doesn't have a whole lot of other departments. So that said, I was hoping that we would have, we can forward if you didn't receive it. But did you actually forward that email on?
I did not.
Okay, fair enough. So then we should send that on so that you can take a look at the information I provided him last week that led to this entry. And the intention was not to make a decision tonight, but rather to start the discussion, because we had this on the annual planning goals and for the township for a while, and I wanted to start pushing that subject forward as part of our making progress as to how we look, how our front door looks on the internet. And there were some, there was probably some interest on each of our parts to put together some goals for what we would like out of the new website. I know I have a couple. So if we could have something in mind by the next time we get together, maybe we can have a discussion about it. And that only to then put together a list of what our individual goals and objectives are. I still think a proposal bid would be good, because I'd like to hear what other people out there, what other vendors have to say about what we want to do, what we currently have, what they think we could go to, and what that cost would be in their mind, as opposed to just a straight up bid as if we're trying to make everybody fit one particular round hole, square peg solution. I'd like to see what they have to have in mind. I think though the technology is broad in the subject of website development, the technology is not always equally well known by vendors. And so sometimes creativity can be a good variable from one vendor to another. And so I'd like to hear what they have to say and what they propose. So that was really just my pitch on the topic.
I'm glad to get it going. Could you mention the name of the company?
Yes, it is Shoemaker Technology Group. And I'll make sure that you guys, we get this sent out, the same email that I sent Bob last week.
Note also that we have this as a tentative topic on the work session for Wednesday.
True enough, yeah. But also bearing in mind, we still have it from last year, so it's not like it's a brand new topic we never thought of. It was still something I was thinking we might have made progress in the last year, but it's been busy.
So is this something, Tim, that you envision creating a whole new website, or taking the website that we have and making revisions and upgrades?
You know, that's, honestly, at this point, I don't have the vision on that. I don't think my vision is precisely the answer, the end all, to the exact question that I think you're asking. I don't have that agenda in mind. What I was looking at is trying to find out from the individual board members what they like and dislike about the current website, what works and doesn't work, what do we like, what do we feel people are telling us in the community that they like or don't like, does it work or doesn't work. And you know, I mean, I think at that point we can then just decide from that list, okay, you know, do we feel like we actually are together as a group describing goals that might require a rewrite, to your point, or goals that might lead us to a, let's just kind of maybe give this a facelift of some sort. You know, I mean, something along those lines. We figure out what the amount of work might be. We might be able to figure that out ourselves. But in the end, I think it comes down to, these are our ideas. We give those to the folks out there who are the vendors and let them decide what they think we might need, what they think we might want, and try to pitch based on that, based on what we've written. You know, they're going to see the website we have today, and they'll see what it's missing, and it's complicated, and there's a lot of pages. It's a big website, you know, and so I guess, I mean, I will say this much. I don't think that this is an expensive, I would not want to see this to be an expensive project as a point. I think that municipal websites are wholly less creative than websites for individuals and businesses that want to be edgy and, you know, creative and come up with some gimmick and whatever. We're a municipality. we don't need to go down that road. You know, that's just my opinion. But I think there's some things we should do to make it more useful. But I don't think those are gimmicks. I think that's just a matter of a vendor's familiarity with developing a website and being able to make it useful.
Any other comments? All right, then patrol vehicle purchase recommendation.
So we have a recommendation from our chief of police regarding purchase of patrol vehicle. Market solicited bids, and based upon application of the local purchasing policy preference provision, he is suggesting that the vehicle be purchased from Zubex at a cost of $28,972. Note that they will honor the price even though the vehicle wasn't ordered prior to September 30th.
Comments?
Bob, we discussed this. This is going to be road ready. We're going to have the bells and whistles put on there by a private contractor.
The latter, yes.
How do we know how long that's going to take?
We don't. We certainly can find that out. It typically takes at least 4 to 6 weeks after we get delivery of the vehicle. But I can confirm that.
We're probably looking at first of the year before we get this vehicle.
Any other comments? Need a motion?
I'd like the motion that we buy the new police vehicle purchased through Zubik Ford for $28,972.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Gajewski, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gajewski,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
No. Motion's passed. Next, Air Force response for the proposed GAC plant location.
This is primarily an informational item at this point. As the board packet was being prepared, this letter came in responding to correspondence that had been sent relative to location of the granular activated carbon treatment facility. Essentially, it's being pointed out that the location that we had suggested in cooperation with the airport authority is problematic from a groundwater flow standpoint with the reinjection plan, and there is potential necessity to then connect to storm sewer system if that is the desired location of the plant. We have begun discussions with AKT Peerless to get feedback there. Also reaching out to the DEQ to talk to them about their position and reaction to the proposal. So there will be more to come. Certainly, we will need to talk about this in some detail moving forward to formulate a position once we have the necessary information. If anybody has specific questions or observations, by all means let me know, and we'll try and run those to ground also.
I want to see them propose other locations, not just pick one and done. They need to give us a selection to choose from. We've already went through our means of proposing something different for them that would actually work in a pretty good benefit to them. But I don't know if they really saw that or not. I'm not dead set on water injection. I'm fine with going through the storm sewer as long as they do the lease on it.
Right.
But even whatever property, if it's township property, again, there's another lease to be done with it.
Absolutely.
And that's where I think the benefit was with the Air Force, is that if they did this other land, they would come out financially better through this whole thing. But
Well, the only problem I have with that is when we did the first orientation, and the people that were involved in the GAC plant that's on base, on site now, that has the reinjection system, they're the ones that said that the reinjection system is a better system. They said it forces the water in and forces the contaminants to the outgoing wells. So, I mean, I'm not an expert on this field by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm based on what the people were telling us, that the injection system is a better system. Now, my interpretation of what they were telling about the new plant is that it's going to be the same plant that they have, only bigger and better, being able to process more gallons per minute, almost double than what the existing plant does. Now, I don't have a problem with the stormwater. The only thing is, all the years they've been using our stormwater system and have puts a good deal of wear and tear on that system. I'm a little reluctant to let them just go ahead and continue to use that for another 20 or 30 years without some sort of, remuneration or take liability or whatever. But based on what we were told at that original orientation, the injection system is a better system. So I guess that's what we would need to decide is how important the injection system is over the stormwater system, because apparently if we're willing to let them use our stormwater system, the site that we proposed, they would accept. So I guess for the board, the main decision is which system do we want? And my concerns were only based on what we were told at that orientation, and that was that the injection system was a better system. And that was my input.
Wasn't it also a topic at that particular meeting that the size of the pipes of the stormwater system there were not actually very large? They weren't large pipes, they were smaller. Therefore, they would have a problem with capacity and water flow. Wasn't that also an issue that was raised that the engineers from the Air Force didn't realize at the time or weren't aware of?
I don't remember anyone having that as being a problem.
I see.
Yeah, so
Fair enough.
I want alternate plans.
Yeah.
Come up with something, the options for us to pick.
Yeah, I think the Air Force has to have some skin in the game here. Make a decision, give us some options, let them do the legwork to figure out. So I agree with that. My only concern is that if they're going to put this in, that it's the best system that we can get. And based on what we were told, the injection system was a better system. So
if they give us a list of options, then we can just pick from there and press on, rather than this ping pong thing that just happened,
Right.
which just wasted an enormous amount of time.
Yep.
yeah, this could go on a long time.
That they wasted an enormous amount of time on this, and the airport authority's time.
with that list of potential properties, I don't want to assume that they'll give us all the details we need to make a decision. So when they propose the properties, whether or not in-ground filtration is viable at that location would be of interest to me, so that we can make an informed decision.
So do we want to put together some kind of a draft letter for consideration at an upcoming meeting that would outline that approach, that we would be seeking feedback from them as to preferred alternate sites with a mindset towards identifying whether it would be groundwater infiltration capable and that kind of thing? At least as basis getting the discussion moving forward. And in the meantime, do some homework on some of the other questions that need to be explored.
I think a letter's a good idea. Do we need to wait the 2 weeks to get board approval on it?
Right.
I don't know that.
I'd rather not spend much more time on it.
I'm comfortable with.
If we could just go ahead and approve supervisor signing a letter and ahead of time and
I agree.
get it out there.
Yeah, I think time is kind of the essence here to get something done. I guess isn't it going to come down to what the board perceives as the best option, whether it be an injection system or a stormwater system?
I think so.
Yeah, I do think so, but I don't know if it's that black and white. There's other variables with locations and such. So
Right,
I
like
think
they
that's
said,
an overriding factor, but not the ultimate.
Because we don't know the geology under the ground, and they stated that that's going to create flow in a direction that they don't want it to go in.
But the point is, if we're willing to let them use the stormwater system, then the site that we approved last time, I mean, it could be done.
Correct.
So I guess if the board is amenable to using the stormwater system, then sort of the problem solved.
To me, as I sit here today, I'm not equipped to make that decision from a geological knowledge standpoint. And I will have to the further research Bob talked about, see what the DEQ, and AKT Peerless, who we hired to advise. Because if it rests on my shoulders about which system is better, I'm just basing off of what the Air Force told me, and I don't want to do it just off that.
Right.
Okay.
And also, it's a wear and tear on the stormwater system.
And that's why I said as long as it's under a lease.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah. Because, I mean, at some point or another, with what they've already gotten away with for free, we're going to be stuck with a very big problem.
And I don't want to seem callous to the fact that it is a better system, because I want what's best for treating the problem. But to what degree is it better? Those things I don't know. Is it marginally better, substantially better? I don't. Is it? Well,
yeah, and I couldn't say that either. They just.
So I do think that is a big crux of it, though. What you're getting at.
Yeah, they were the ones that pointed out that was the best system, was that injection. So.
Because to your point, that location we proposed, we could stop this right now potentially if. But for me, I need more.
Based on the way this letter sounds, it sounds to me like they're pretty much stuck on this property, whether we like it or not. And that's
well, but I think they left the door open to Bill's point that if we make certain, if we concede on the stormwater, I think they've opened the door to put that at our proposed location.
They'd be willing to lease the storm system from us.
Then that would be great.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
You need a motion for the letter?
That'd probably be a good idea.
All right. Is there a motion?
I move that Mr. Stalker write a letter on behalf of the board and request them to provide options, them being the Air Force, to provide options, and that do we want anything else? Do we want to propose these other two sites? Are we going to try to revisit that or just leave that alone?
Well, I think we want the list of their proposals, but do we want to go anywhere on the avenue of what we would be asking for a lease on the sewer system?
That's too soon. I don't think I'd go into any of that. We want to find out locations first.
But to Bill's point, and I don't want to backtrack here and make this all muddied, but
sorry, it's okay.
If we can have, resolve it.
I think the letter should include that if
if they're willing, willing to use the site we proposed and use our storms system, that they'd be willing to lease that system from us
Mm-hmm.
at a charge, at a
Gauge,
fee.
gauge their interest in that, and
Yep, I agree
pending
with
that, then we,
Right.
if you're not willing to do that, then pitch us some locations.
Because if they're willing to do that, then problem solved. They could,
And we're okay with
we're
that.
okay with that. We can move
If-
forward.
yeah.
Is that
Okay,
good for your motion?
I was gonna say, exactly. At an hour and 43 minutes into this meeting, you can play this back on
Yeah,
YouTube.
right.
So,
I'm making notes.
You want this letter executed by the, signed by the superintendent or the supervisor?
Supervisor for 2 sets of eyes would be,
fine, both,
yeah.
or,
I mean, well, signed by,
it's fine.
Okay.
Yep.
so for clarity,
I was gonna say, that was quite a motion here. Should I write it down like I did once before?
we'll see what you think about this.
It's like only Christmas.
Only Chris made you do that, exactly.
Okay, so I have, write a letter to the Air Force, asking for options of other locations pending gauging the Air Force's interest in a storm sewer lease.
For the airport property.
Okay.
Yep,
For,
that's right.
okay. For the
For the
airport
previously recommended airport
Okay.
property.
There we are. Thank you. If you want to hand me the paper, I'll read it to make it official.
You can't read what I just wrote. Only I can read this. All right.
And that's the truth.
All right, motion by Mr. Cummings. Is there support?
I'll support that.
Support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gajewski,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed.
I'd
Next,
also
we're,
like to, just one comment on that. I believe there's going to be a RAB meeting in November,
November 1st.
so perhaps we could get some input at that meeting on this issue, possibly.
That's right.
Wordsmith rezoning request.
There is correspondence that was added to the packet from our zoning administrator setting forth a proposed rezoning concept for which feedback is being sought from the board.
My feedback is that I think we do need to change this zoning. I think it's redundant to have wordsmith zoning in there. I think it was fine back when it was considered a separate district. We had federal oversight with it. But now that that has been eliminated, I think that we need to create some continuity through the entire township with our zoning. Come to the point of that wordsmith is gone. There really shouldn't be much of a reference to wordsmith. It was the famous wordsmith, now it's the infamous wordsmith. We do have a museum to memorialize it, but I think it's time that we make this Oscoda Township, not Oscoda Township, and wordsmith.
Yeah. And the planning commission wanted to emphasize that fact that we're not looking to eliminate the wordsmith district, that, you know, the new sign's been put up.
Yep.
If anything, something should be added to that sign that says the historic Wordsmith District. But the similarities between zoning districts, between, for instance, WR3 and R3, are virtually mirror images of one another, but they take up, each one requires 4 or 5 pages in the zoning manual. So what we're looking, in the ordinance, in 165 ordinance. So what we're looking to do is try and reduce some of that paperwork in the ordinance, combine those districts. It would require a rezoning, but we think that would be beneficial in terms of streamlining our ordinance to make things much simpler to understand when people are looking at that.
I agree. I think for continuity and just clarity, easier to understand, easier to administer, makes sense to me. So, but in light of the, time constraints, I would say I think this is a great idea, and the planning commission can decide where it fits in your workload. Because you guys, I mean, I don't know what's more pressing. You guys have more knowledge on that than I do, so I don't know if that's what's being asked for here is, what level of priority to give this, but I think it's a good idea.
Well, I think to that point, what we were looking for was that based on the limited amount of time that our zoning administrator has, the planning commission didn't want to put in a lot of time and effort if this board was going to say, no, we don't want to make those changes.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what we're looking for is input from this board saying, yes, it makes sense to remove the W from the zoning districts and consolidate all those into one zone, the zoning districts with similar, would be the exact same requirements. So if this board is in agreement with that, then we will move forward and make those changes.
Sure. I think it's a good idea. I don't want it to be perceived that we're, dumping on the planning commission or giving extra workload. I mean, I think this is a great idea. At what pace it gets, taken care of, I don't know, and that's for the planning commission to decide, from my opinion. If this happens this year, if it happens next year, as time allows, I guess is what, I'm not saying, I think this is a great idea, get it done in a month or a year, I mean.
No,
so.
there's no time constraint on this. Our point was, we didn't want to put a lot of work into it and then present it to the board. The board says, no, we don't want to.
Makes perfect sense.
We don't want to make the change, so I guess we're looking for
Consensus
from the board that we should move forward with this.
You got it.
Jim?
No further comment.
I'm good.
Okay. You have consensus.
Okay. We don't need a vote.
What's that?
We don't need a vote to make it official.
No, when you go through your whole zoning changes, then that comes back to the board, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, so we'll make our vote then.
I meant in terms of moving forward with this.
We don't need to vote for that, do we?
Just a consent, everybody's,
Yeah.
okay, all right, good enough.
support the idea.
You're looking for conceptual support now, is sort of my understanding, correct? And then the actual rezoning would take place at a later date.
Right.
Yes.
Right, and we have no time frame to get this done, but we'll be working on it over the next months and bring something to the board for approval.
Okay. All right, the next clerical assistant resignation.
Yes, on the board table is a resignation from Ms. Mary Morala. She worked for many years at the Office of Economic Development, transferred to the police department, and she is going to be leaving employ of the township October 20th of this year. I would suggest that the resignation be accepted with regrets.
I would like to change that and make a motion that we accept this resignation with great gratitude to her work that she's done for us over the years.
Thank you. I agree.
Is there support?
Support it.
Much support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed.
Bob, she's only giving us 10 days. Is that going to be a problem to fill that job?
We're gonna have a gap there, yes, most certainly. I wouldn't say it's gonna be a huge problem, but we're gonna have to work around it, but there is some concern.
You talked to her about that?
I have not. My understanding is that she's got some circumstances that don't really allow her to go beyond that date.
Okay.
All right, we're now into our second public comment period. There's a 4-minute time limit. Anyone may speak. Does anybody wish to speak? Please introduce yourself.
Robert Tadger, Hillcrest Drive, Oscoda. I have a request that I hope that you will take into consideration for future planning in the township. Although I have been a member of the Oscoda Planning Commission for a few years now, I am not here representing them. I'm here speaking for myself. I, however, have spoken on this subject to the Planning Commission meeting, and I believe it was well received. What I'm talking about is I hope for your consideration for the township to join the Michigan Association of Planning, or MAP. Michigan Association of Planning is a 501c3 organization dedicated to promoting sound community planning that benefits the residents of Michigan. Today the association has a membership of more than 4,000. 80% of its members are citizens appointed to the Planning Commission or zoning boards of appeals. The group membership costs about $650 a year. It's designed for cities, counties, townships, or villages, and can include community elected boards, planning commission, zoning board of appeal, and staff. This membership category accommodates up to 12 members. Additional members can be included in a group for $50 per person. The one added benefit to MAP is the community planning officials don't have to spend money on gas or drive very far to attend MAP training programs. MAP on-site workshop programs brings training to you. At an on-site workshop, an instructor comes into the location at a time and date convenient for your participants and presents comprehensive educational programs addressing specific needs of your community. Thank you for listening, and they have pricing for what those cost. And most of those are under $1,000 per session. But like I said, this way, instead of having certain members spending money going to like Grand Rapids or about in housing and gas and not having as many people participating in that type of a program, now we can bring them here and have more people from more of our boards learning on these very important sessions that they have. And if you look at their website, you would find it very interesting. They are also the largest affiliation of American planning associates. So that's about it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reed? Question. It's a matter of, I guess maybe protocol, but why would Mr. Taser have to be part of the public comment if he wants to discuss the planning board, which is a key element to this township's government? Should he be simply part of our agenda? Is there a, I don't think he should be limited to 4 minutes, for example. I mean,
if there's a subject the planning commission wants to talk to us about in particular, then it can be added to the agenda, not
I see.
have that limit.
Okay, I got it. All right, so this was more of a personal thing today. All right, fair enough. Thank you. I want to make sure we weren't slighting you. So thank you.
Hello again, Kathy Woosterbarth. I wanted to bring up AKT Peerless again. In May, we were all pretty excited, I think, when they came to orient us, and I wanted to give an actual general overview that was in the minutes from that work session of their services. So, Mr. Gear made it clear that AKT Peerless's responsibility is to represent the interest of Oscoda Township. Each of the consultants gave an overview of their area of expertise and the services they provide. Mr. Gear handles the advocacy and government affairs. Mr. Schintz focused on economic development, and Robinson responsibilities include environmental due diligence and regulatory compliance. Mr. Anthony was the founder of AKT Peerless and a geologist. His focus is on scientific front regarding fluid flow through, porous media, chemistry, and engineering. And the reason that I brought that up is because it sounds like this is a resource that we should be using. And it was, brought to us in this orientation on May 23rd, and it sounds like we're not using them to their full extent, from what I can tell, if we're just now getting around to asking them about these these sites that were proposed to us at the last minute. I would have expected to have some more information about suspected sites that we could use for the GAC system presented to them earlier than this. So I'm bringing that up because I would like to see them utilized more. In addition, I wanted to remind you that you now have the resource of the RAB, so that you don't feel like you have to make all of these decisions on your own. Of course, it's not a voting body by any means. We all recognize that, but there are resources there that you can utilize in terms of investigation, looking at different things that you have questions about, and all the stakeholders are there at those meetings in order to be able to ask those questions, you know, when everyone's together. So I would ask you to utilize that forum for these large decisions that you're getting ready to make, because you know, their responsibilities are environmental restoration activities, plans for environmental restoration, and comments to the Air Force about the environmental restoration. So utilize that you know, that forum, I would encourage. The last thing doesn't have anything to do with that. It actually is regarding the supervisor, the superintendent's evaluation. And from what I heard, there were 5 respondents to the evaluation. Is that what I heard? And there's 7 board members. I didn't see the evaluations in the packet. Was that something that's normally included? Did I miss that? I normally see the...
No, I would like to have had them included, but I gave a few extra days in case somebody had a last-minute response. And
Okay.
we didn't.
All right, so will it be the expectation of all board members to actually have that evaluation filled out and completed? The expectation of each board member?
Correct, that's right.
But they will be all completed?
No, it's closed down now.
So not all 7 board members will be completing the evaluation?
Correct.
Okay, well, I would like it to be the expectation for next year to have all board members completing these evaluations. It's the responsibility of our governmental leaders to evaluate this very important, you know, position that we have. That it is, I think Bob's doing a great job, and I would like that reflected and to be on, you know, in the record that his evaluations are important and worthy of inclusion in our minutes.
Anybody else?
Just one comment from me. I appreciate the extension from the board and the confidence you show in doing that, and I'll do my best to work towards justifying the extension next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, then we're on to board comments. Does anybody have anything?
I have my usual laundry list of committees and that. Yeah, I know, shut up. All right, so the Develop by Osco committee, that next meeting is October 12th, Thursday. The location has not yet been determined. We usually get a few days before the meeting. It's either at the Hale location or some other, maybe in Tawas. So we'll find out where that's going to be. Nevertheless, that's the date. Which, by the way, then I've been getting involved in helping them recover the domain names for the Develop by Osco entity. They've lost a couple domain names to not having handled their domain names properly in the past. They're coming up for renewal, so we want to make sure they don't lose their name. Then with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, there was a water contamination community get-together, is I guess the best engagement group, is how we're calling that officially. Thank you very much. And so we will meet next on December 6th, Wednesday, 1 to 3 p.m., I'm sorry, at Wiltsey's. And this particular group, though there sounds like there's a lot of discussion about water contamination, this particular group is important because it provides a different opportunity for discussion than other meetings that we normally would go to. this is directly with the Health and Human Services, and you can ask all the health-related questions you could possibly stand and go into all the information you want to know about water filtration and options and costs and other factors that are specifically addressable by Health and Human Services. And this particular group is asking for more attendees, so people who have questions in this regard really are encouraged to attend. Once again, that's Wiltsey's, December 6th, 1 to 3 p.m. The Oscoda Community Center Subcommittee meeting on September 21st was not held due to insufficient attendance. So we scheduled the next meeting for October 26th for 10 to 11 a.m. That will be again a Thursday, and at that point I will be discussing the results of the survey with them. The Oscoda Community Center Haunted House, as you've probably seen on the marquee out in front of Township Hall and in other locations, it started, we had a walkthrough as Township employees last Thursday. I went again last Saturday with my son, and it was great. It was even better than the one from Thursday. So I just want to say it was a great opportunity for fun, and the guys over at Old Orchard and the Parks and Rec group are just doing a great job. It's amazing. So for $5, it's a tremendous entertainment. So it's every Saturday from 7 until 10, with the inclusion of course, can't miss this opportunity, Friday the 13th, this Friday. So an extra day for fun and scares.
Was your son impressed?
Both times, yes.
Both times. Okay.
Yes. He's usually hiding behind me.
You were hiding behind me.
Yeah, this time, well, he was with his friends, so they both had to kind of, stiffen up and walk ahead of me, and I was the one sitting there watching the back, watching it all scare him out. Yeah. So it was all good.
Anybody have anything else?
Tomorrow is the last day to register to vote for the November 7th elections. If anyone wants to do that, now would be the time. Tomorrow would be the time.
How about absentee ballots?
Available for pickup in the office.
Okay. The election is November 7th, 27 days from tomorrow.
It's counting them down.
Exactly.
I just had one comment. The IET committee, we're having a meeting on the 12th for several members of the committee are getting together to try and form a marketing group, to try and market this to, going forward, raise funds for not only funding the committee, but also for maintenance of the bike path for the future.
Nice. Cool.
Is it customary for us to do anything as far as publicizing elections or not? Something in the paper or anything?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Anybody got anything else? To Mr. Tazer's point regarding the Michigan Planning Association, I completely agree with that. We belong to the MTA.
Mm-hmm.
While the MTA, I think, does a pretty good job, they are not the whole picture.
Right.
And I do think that we should be members of both the Planning Association and also the MML. The MML is much more technically oriented. They have a lot of really good documents on what the law really says.
Good.
So. All right, then we are going to go into closed session. I need a motion to go into closed session with Mr. Stalker, since he has pertinent information, to consider purchase of real property.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Gajewski.
Adjourned.
Roll call.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Gajewski.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Weed.
Yes, we are now in closed session.
Calculate that.